What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Commentary for you. Jimmy Smith, Ryan Moody, our MMA Show. And Jimmy, today at least we have news coming out from Khabib's camp that he may not be able to make UFC 249 due to the restrictions of leaving Russia. Interestingly enough, Tony has responded that he's just hiding. Dana White continues to push this event that is just now 18 short days away. And I think, to me, as news trickles out that showcases the more and more unlikely scenario of these fighters coming to the event, I am more surprised that this event will not happen than if it will. I mean, at this point, I'm sure Dana White can put something together, but what he can put together is going to be the true question here.
I want to break down your wording a little bit. This event will happen. What is this event at this point? That's my question. Can he get warm bodies in a cage? Look, that's hard enough, considering what's going on across the world, not just in our country, but travel restrictions and borders closing and all these things. But without Khabib, this is just another fight, right? What we were all excited about was Khabib versus Ferguson. Finally, let me throw a hypothetical. And I'm literally just picking names here. Let's say Tony Ferguson fights Justin Gaethje. All right, let's say Gaethje's ready to go. Let's say Gaethje fights, because he wanted to be a backup anyway. Let's say he's ready to go. They do it on. Now, what I read was United Arab Emirates was where he was trying to go and couldn't go. Let's say they have it in the UAE, and it's Gaethje versus Ferguson. Let's say Gaethje lights him up and it's eyes wide shut, because when Gaethje wins, that's how he tends to win, right? Now, I'm not saying necessarily Gaethje wins that fight. I'm saying if he does win, it's brutal. There goes that fight for all eternity. Probably. We wanted the two best guys in their prime on the greatest streaks of their careers. Obviously, Khabib has never lost, but Tony on a great streak. That's what we wanted. Is anything less than that worth the risk? Let's not mince words here, to life and limb that everyone who gets near this fight is risking. Now, I'm not saying the Khabib Ferguson fight is worth life and limb. I'm not saying that. I don't think this fight should happen at all. But my point is, should whatever they put together be worth the risks they are taking? That's another question we have to ask ourselves now. If Khabib is really trapped in Russia, is second or third worth not waiting a few months? I don't know.
Well, I think the answer is, in Dana's hands, this has become overtly personal to him, and the demand to put on a fight in the face of everyone telling him not to and every other major organization seemingly shutting down, his desire to push back to normal is commendable, but also a little bit absurd. And if you don't look at it that way, I don't know what to tell you. You can only have one side or the other. You're either glad the fights are happening and you're going to support them, or you don't feel like they should be and you won't. However, I would say with the Ferguson fight, we've waited 5 years. What is another 5 months? And I understand the analogy that you threw out there, Justin Gaethje, but what if something happens that sets him off? Obviously, we have to go past Ramadan with Khabib. What happens if something pushes out Tony Ferguson where he's even further along? I mean, I guess we have to either make the concession that we're going to never see this fight, or we are going to see this fight. It does seem very doomed. It does seem very jinxed. It's had the weirdest things happen to prevent it. But at least this one, there was some foresight to. I will say, though, since you mentioned that fight, I'm going to run through, just spur of the moment. I need a fight night or a pay-per-view response from you, okay? So if I threw this fight out to you, would you believe it's on a pay-per-view, or would you believe it's a fight night headliner? Jeremy
Ready.
Stevens, Calvin Kadar.
Fight night.
Islam Makhachev, Alexander Hernandez.
As main events?
Yes.
We're talking all these fight night.
Main event.
Yeah, fight night.
Magomed Ankalaev versus Ian Cutelaba.
Fight night.
Jessica Andrade, Rose Namajunas.
I couldn't see it headlining a main event. It might be a co-main for a pay-per-view.
So
But
none
not
of
by itself.
these we agree, other than the possibility, well, obviously with Tony fighting someone, none
Right.
of these are absolutely stop everything, must see this fight, oh my God, this is going to happen. And I'm not saying that other cards are full of them, but I'm saying the time frame in which we've had without a tangible fight card in pay-per-view, you should have a little bit more riding on this than just these fights. I'm not saying it's going to be a bad card. I'm just saying none of this is something that can't wait. None of this is urgent, and none of these fights are really all that critical, even in terms of their division, where they have to be done in 18 days or no one's going to watch the UFC anymore and none of this matters. I don't understand the continued pressure to want to put this fight together. If you lose the main event, you pretty much lost the whole thing. I mean, that's the reality.
Right. None of those fights are pay-per-view worthy. You know what I mean? Main event pay-per-view worthy. None of them. But the larger picture is what Dana White might be thinking. Remember, money's still going out. Very little money is coming in. Here's the deal. He's worried about his whole organization backing up, in a sense. Another couple months without any fights. Basically, the rest of your year is pretty screwed. You spend the rest of the year scrambling, trying to make up cards that were supposed to happen. Contracts start backing up because, you know, certain fighters have contracts that say you have to use me X number of times a year, or offer me a fight X number of times per year. If they can't do that, that negates the contract. The deal with ESPN, he has to provide content. He cannot do that right now. All the other leagues that have shut down have two things going for them. Number one, they have, well, three things. Number one, they have an ownership system, meaning each team has its own owner. They're all billionaires. They can ride out a bad year. They've had strikes that have canceled baseball years and football years. Baseball and football both survived. It's not the end of the world. Number two, they are American institutions. MMA is the only major sport that didn't exist till I was in high school. So the idea that the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball would go away or would be permanently damaged is unlikely. They've just been around so long, we're used to them. The third thing is, we're not used to MMA going away for several months. We're used to every other sport being seasonal. So it can be a few months and it's not a big deal. I'm used to not seeing football. I'm used to not seeing basketball for months at a time. Combat sports, MMA, it doesn't work that way. It's this, you know, you got to keep the fire burning, you know, got to strike while the iron's hot, all these analogies of keeping it going. Momentum is very, very important. And Dana White knows that. So in another sense, he's not just fighting for this particular fight. He's fighting to keep his business afloat, to keep the UFC's brand in the public eye, to keep people talking about it, to keep you thinking about it. He's got to keep that going. And this fight has come, I think, in his mind to represent that struggle, right? Making this fight happen keeps UFC, keeps MMA in the forefront of people's minds. And without that, we're in deep trouble. Now, is that true? I don't know. But I think in his mind, it's kind of blown up into this thing. And that's why he's been so adamant about it.
But the challenge, we talked about this before, was when you make this bigger than the sport, which is clearly what you're kind of saying is becoming, then when it fails, you're magnifying that failure even more. Now, when this fight doesn't happen, there's a huge issue because you've put kind of all your eggs in this one basket, even though there's other fights on the card. I would also offer to you that this is a company that's now going to look at a minimum of a month and a half, if not closer to 2 months, where there's no walk-up gate. So as far as their revenue is concerned, it's going to continue to take a hit even beyond this, whether they are or not allowing people into arenas afterwards, which is in most cases going to be up to the state or the county. And secondarily, are you going to have people that even if they do be wanting to go out to these events where there may be 6,000 to 15,000 people?
Let me add something else to that. You're asking people to pay for a pay-per-view when they don't have a job, when they don't know where their next paycheck is coming from, when they're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on and pay their mortgage and send their kids to college. You're asking a lot. And with the pay-per-view system that has been the moneymaker for the UFC, it's going to be a while until that's going again. I can't just flip on the TV and see Ferguson versus Khabib. I got to pay for it. How many people are in a position to do that? Right now, not a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, it's almost the thought process of when you open up a sales pamphlet and you see the item that you want and you go to the store and it's not there. Do you turn around and walk away, or do you say, well, maybe they don't have the 75-inch TV that I wanted, but there's a 70 there that'll be just as good and I'll buy it instead? I think a lot of people go somewhere with the expectation of what they want, and when it's not there, they don't do it. They don't buy it. They walk away from it. They don't see it. And I think, if nothing else, the UFC may be learning a very tough thought process with their consumer is, if you don't give us exactly what we want for whatever reason, we may not buy the product from you. And like you said, the ramifications of this are very long-term, especially for a sport that does not know the true consequence of an off-season and having to bring back in, unlike other sports, there's no spring training, there's no preseason, there's nothing that mentally prepares us for a season to start, if you will. We're just used to it always being here. Probably a topic for another show as far as how we've done without any sports on a global level. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly something to be said about the business model of the UFC that's being tested here in a way it's never been tested before, at least in the last 20 years.
Exactly. I mean, as much as the country and the world, we're all in uncharted territory here. The UFC is in uncharted territory as well. It's along for the ride like everybody else. How will it ride this out? It has essentially the same mentality as every other business. We've seen the major league sports ride out strike years, right? There haven't been a lot. The last one was what, in the 90s in baseball? That's the last one I really remember. I've lived through a couple where they had a strike, they couldn't come to an agreement, and we didn't have that sport that year. And they survived. They made it. Being in the position the UFC is in, which is basically they're holding up an entire sport in the United States for the most part, yet they don't have the diffused responsibility of ownership of various teams like the NFL and Major League Baseball and NBA. They all do. All these guys can ride this out together. Dana White, having the position he is in, as powerful as he is, he's also extremely vulnerable. There's nobody else. No one's going to chip in and help out. It doesn't work that way. So you have to see his actions and his motivations all from that standpoint.
With that said, obviously, we know now the clock, I guess, in a way, is ticking for more and more of this fight not happening. Not for anyone's fault other than just a global sanction. Obviously, Russia is going to do what Russia needs to do to protect their country and their citizens, and there's really no fault to be had in any of this. This is circumstances outside of any of our control that none of us expected to ever take place. But unfortunately, it is the world that we're currently living in. It is the new normal, which is a statement I absolutely hate, but I hear people recite it all the time. So with that said, we want to know your guys' thoughts on this. Now that this fight is in serious jeopardy, you can no longer objectively look at it and just hope that it's going to take place. Does this change your stance on the card? Would you no longer buy it? Should you no longer have to buy it? Should it be free? What is your opinion on this fight? We appreciate you guys checking this out, and we'll be back very shortly with more commentary.